Hi everybody, and welcome to part 2 of the Hello Fall Bench Buddy, and this is the September rectangle shaped bench buddy. And I just thought it turned out so cute. So in the live class, we created the whole top with all the applique and the glitter vinyl. It was so much fun. And then we trimmed it. So I have trimmed my top. And then I also removed as much of the tearaway stabilizer as I could. There's a little bit more on here I might take off yet, but most of it's gone. I like to use the tearaway because then it makes the top a little bit more supple. And if you put cutaway on the back, it makes it kind of like pull a little bit because the cutaway doesn't give. So I like to remove that tearaway. I use the tearaway instead. So I thought it turned out really well. And so here's the finished top. And now we're going to do the embellishments, which are the little leaves. There's little purple leaves that they put on here with the organza. And then we're also going to put it together and put the binding on. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to make the little leaves. And these are made out of purple organza, and they're going to be like freestanding, but they have organza in them. So the first thing you need to do is put in your hoop 2 layers of the wash away stabilizer. So in other words, like Floriani Wet and Gone or Dime Sew and Wash. So that there's 2 layers in here. And what I did is I just cut one piece and I folded it in half so that I have 2 layers in my hoop. Okay. And then you also need a second piece. They told you to have a second piece of, or I should say a third piece, because you got 2 in the hoop already, to lay on the top. So we're going to lay this on top of the organza. Okay. And then you need a piece of the glitter dot organza, and this is the purple. That's the color they recommended. And make sure when you put this in the hoop that the glitter is up. Okay. So we're going to go ahead. I've got a piece of that as well. All right, so the first step, and then, oh, I forgot about my bobbin. So I have purple thread in my needle, and I want to have matching embroidery thread in the bobbin. So I have my purple, if I take this door off, you can see I have my purple embroidery thread in my bobbin, and I also have that same purple thread in my needle. And we're going to use that throughout this whole design. All right, so the first thing, we're going to go ahead, and this is done in a 4x4 hoop, so it's a real small hoop. And the first thing that's going to stitch out on just the stabilizer is going to be the placement lines. So I'm just going to go ahead and stitch these placement lines out. And then we'll place the organza. I've been wanting to do these pillows for quite some time. The fall and Christmas ones are my favorites. And these are so cute. So I'm anxious to get these done. So here's our placement lines for our leaves. I think I must have a thread in my cutter because my cutter's not cutting terribly well. So I have to open up my door and or open up my needle plate and see if there's a piece of thread stuck in it. You can see it's leaving little tails too, so it does that if the cutter's upset. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to trim off these tails. And the one, I always do this when I put the bobbin thread in the bobbin, when I put the embroidery thread in the bobbin, it has a tendency to be a little on the thick side. So I always go through and I trim all these tails off the back before I move on. That way there's less to do when you're trying to trim it and cut it at the very end. So I'm just going to trim some of these knots off and get them out of the way. Those are just the placement lines. Okay, that's better. Okay, then the next step is going to be placing the glitter organza on top of the stabilizer, and I'm trying to make sure that I have them right side up. Have the glitter right side up. I have a hard time telling which is which, so I think I've got this right. So I'm going to put this in here. Oops. Come on, it's stuck. There we go. Lay that down, and then you're going to lay that second piece of the wash away over the top of your organza. I think they did the 3 pieces so that you would have a little bit more stiffness so that the leaves would be more dimensional then. Okay, so I'm going to lay that over the top, and then step number 2 in the machine is going to be the tack down lines. So we're going to tack this down to the stabilizer. And the stabilizers, the other piece of stabilizers on top. So we'll go around it a couple times. We're getting our second one on here. These are cute. I didn't realize that they were going to put dimensional. When I first read the pattern, I thought they were just sewn on with the organza as the applique, but then I realized they were dimensional. So these will be really pretty. I thought it was interesting that they chose purple for the leaves. So, but they are really pretty. It just puts a little pop of color on the fall colors, you know. So, all right. So there's our 3 tack down lines. That was step number 2. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to turn this over and see, I got all these little knots back here. I'm going to trim these off close because when it goes to do the satin stitching, then it'll cover these up nicer. This usually I only notice this with the machines really when you've got bobbin or embroidery thread in the bobbin, because it's kind of thick. You know, it's not normal bobbin thread. Bobbin thread's much thinner, and it leaves a bigger knot on the back. So when I'm doing the lace, I like to kind of trim and clean up as I'm going, so I don't have to try to do it afterwards. Okay, then second, I got a little knot up here too. Like I said, I think my cutter needs to be cleaned out, so I'll do that when I turn the camera off here in a minute. Okay, so the next step then is to trim the organza top layer of wash away stabilizer only close to the stitch line, and stitch, we already did that, trim the organza and top layer of wash away stabilizer only close to the stitch line. So in other words, don't cut through the lower stabilizer. Okay, so we're just going to trim through the 2 layers on the top. And we're just like applique. So this is just applique, but it's going to be freestanding instead. So it's kind of neat how they did this. So we're just going to trim these around close to the stitches. And they do give nice, ample satin stitches. So if you're a little further away than you wanted to be, it'll be just fine. I'm going to get fairly close. Here we go. And I'm just doing the top 2 layers. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. Okay, turn it around here. And I'm using my Ginger 6-inch double curved embroidery scissors. These work real well for these small trimming. I can get that little point right in there where I want it. So, all right, it's just about done here. Okay, so there is our 3 leaves trimmed. The top layer is trimmed in the hoop. Get some of the glitter off there. Okay. And then step number 3 is the organza leaf satin outline. So it's going to outline all the leaves. So that's the next step. I am going to do mine all in the same color. They do stop before the detail in the leaves, so that if you want to change the thread or change like to a lighter thread here and a darker thread in the middle, you can do that. I'm just going to do mine all on the same color. Okay, so we're going to do the satin stitch here. I'll get it started, and then I'll probably just stop the camera for a minute while it stitches, because it's just going to be stitching the satin stitch outline. But they do a nice outline on all their designs, so that it really covers well. And I think also what helps a lot is this upper layer of water soluble, because it covers up anything that's underneath and gives it a chance to really cover the outline very, very neatly. So, okay. So I'm going to go ahead and let this sew, and I'll go ahead and stop the camera for a minute, and then we'll come back to do the detail on the leaves. Okay, so it's finished my outline on all my leaves, and it's going to be more purple looking once you see it. Remember that piece of the water solubles on the top, so it looks a little bit dull right now, but it will be much more purple looking once we remove this with the water. So the next step then is going to be the leaves, and it's going to do the little veins and stuff, and I am just going to, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and leave mine all in the same color. And that way I didn't have to wind 2 bobbins, but you can do that if you would like. So these are the little veins in the leaves, and it's going to stitch these out next, and then we will remove it from the hoop. So I'll go ahead and stitch these out, and then I'll come back when they're done, and then I'll show you how to take it out of the hoop, and then we'll talk about the rinsing and the tacking them down. I usually pin them down so that they don't get all wrinkly when I do the after I do the rinsing. So we'll turn the camera off for just a minute while this is doing the little leaf insides, and then we'll come back and finish up the project. Okay, so this is just about done here. Did all the little leaf veins, and that was step number 4 in the machine. So we are now done embroidering these. So I'm going to go ahead and remove them from the hoop. And then I've got a little cleanup to do back here on the back. I like to do this before I soak them because sometimes I have a hard time getting them trimmed after they're kind of stiff. So I'm going to go ahead and trim these little ends to neaten up the back because we want the back to be pretty too. Since they're going to be dimensional, some of it might show a little bit. Okay, 1 second here. A couple more of these. Have to kind of shake it. Get my ends done. There we go. All right. Okay, so there is our little dimensional leaves. So now the next step is going to be, I'm going to trim around these fairly close to the leaf. I don't trim into your stitches or anything, so you don't have a ton of extra stabilizer to wash out. So I'm just going to trim these and out of the stabilizer. Doesn't have to be neat because it's all going to wash away. And then I'm going to take these into my sink in the bathroom and in warm water. You want to use warm water, and not hot, but warm water. And you don't want these to soak very long because remember, we do want them to be stiff so that they can be dimensional on the pillow. So I just want to make sure that the stabilizer is rinsed out, but I don't leave them soak hardly at all. And then what I do is I take a tea towel, like a dish towel or a tea towel, and I just dab the excess water out of them. And then I'm going to pin them onto my onto a piece of styrofoam. So what I'll do is I'm going to go rinse these out in the sink with the warm water. I'm going to dab it with my tea towel to get the excess moisture out of them. And then I'll show you how I'm going to put these onto my styrofoam. And so I'll have to stop the camera for a minute while I go in and do that, and then I will show you how to do the styrofoam part. Okay, so I have rinsed the stabilizer out, and you can see there's no stabilizer in this now. They're still wet. And then what I'm going to do, this is a piece of like 1-inch styrofoam, and it's on a sheet. It's one of those sheets you can buy like at a hobby store. I think I got this at Walmart or someplace like that. And I leave the plastic on so that things don't stick to the styrofoam. And what I like to do, and incidentally I do with this with all my lace, I like to use these, and then I take some pins, and I have pins that I only use for this because they get a little sticky. But I like to pin my lace down so that it doesn't curl while it's drying. So that way it stays nice and flat. So I'm just going to pin my little leaves down to my styrofoam here. And I do this with all my lace. Any lace that I make, I do it this way because that way it doesn't get all wrinkly. A lot of lace, you know, you see lace that looks kind of wrinkly or curly, and if you pin it down like this, it lets it dry flat and then it stays flat. And then you can adjust it, you know, you can bend it and stuff. But this works really well for lace. So my mother actually taught me to do this. She made crocheted snowflakes. And this is how she did all of her snowflakes with a stiffener. And we pinned them down. I used to help her pin them down on the boards. And in fact, I've got most of these were hers. I have a bunch of hers, her styrofoam, because then you can do a whole bunch if you're doing a lot of lace at once. I have quite a few of these. So, okay, so there's my little lace leaves, and I'm going to let those dry before I put them on the pillow. In the instructions, it actually tells you to put them on before you sew the back on the pillow, but I'm going to put them on afterwards because I want them good and dry before I attach them to my pillow. And it also tells you to sew them on, and I may just use a little hot glue because I don't like to sew them on. So we'll see how they dry first, but I'm going to let them dry first like this, and then we'll move on. While these are drying, we'll move on and we'll do the back of the pillow and put it together with the binding. Okay, so we're going to move on to the back of the pillow, and it's done in two pieces, so it's an envelope back. So I have this cute little orange and brown plaid that I'm going to use for my back, and I have turned under on one of the short sides of the longer piece. There's two pieces, this and then this little short piece. I've turned under a 1/4 of an inch and then a 1/4 of an inch again to make a little hem, and this is the shorter piece. Okay, so this is one of the one side only is what you need. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to I've switched my machine over to sewing, and I have a cotton, a brown Pima cotton thread in my machine and in my bobbin, and I'm going to go ahead and just stitch those little hems in. Plug my foot controller back in here. I'm just going to stitch those little hems into my backs first. So we'll do that. I'm just going to use a straight stitch in the center, drop my needle, and I'm just going to sew right along the edge of that. I'm sewing from the back. So we're just going to get those little hems in there. Okay. Simple little thing. I love envelope backs because then everything looks so nice and it's so easy to do on. Okay, so let's do this one. And they do most of their envelope backs for these little pillows like this with like one short end and one long end. So these are those little, this one's it'll end up 5.5 by 9.5. Okay, so there's the two envelope backs ready to be put onto the pillow. And then I also need to ready my binding because I am going to put the binding on for you. A lot of people struggle with binding. You know, if you haven't done a lot of quilting, you probably haven't done a lot of binding either. So the first step to putting on your binding or to ready your binding is you have, it told you to cut two pieces that were 2 1/4 inches wide by the width of the fat quarter, which is like 21 inches. And that's what I have here. And what I'm going to do, these are the two selvage ends, and what I'm going to do first is I'm going to put the right sides together. So here's one strip and here's the second strip. I'm going to put them at a 45-degree angle with the selvage edges over each other like this so that I can cut them off. And then I'm going to sew from corner to corner. Okay, so I'm just going to sew where those lines meet, and this one I usually eyeball. The other thing I can do, and I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it, I can turn on my laser light, which is really awesome. Hopefully you can, oh yeah, you can see that pretty well. So that way I can aim easier for my, and I have my laser light in the center so I can aim easier for that other corner, see? So it makes it a lot easier. There we go. So I'm just going to sew from corner to corner to get my binding all in one piece, and then let me turn this off. So the next step then would be to trim this, and I'm just going to trim it up and down about 1/4 of an inch. If it's not a perfect 1/4 inch, it's fine. Okay, like this. And that way it cut off those selvage edges. So those are the selvage edges. Okay. And then what I'll do is I'm going to take this over to my ironing table and I'm going to open up the seam and iron it down. And then I'm going to turn this binding so that the wrong sides are together and then all the way down. And I have one long piece of binding then for the outside of our pillow. So if you give me a minute, I'll turn off the video and I'll run over and do that. And then we'll be ready to move on to the assembly of the pillow. Okay, so I've got my prepared binding here. It's all ironed nice and has a nice crease on it, and in one piece. And then here's my backs. Okay, so the step number 3 on page 10 says to go ahead and put your organza leaves on the pillow. Now, I usually don't put my embellishments on until after I put it together because I always make a mess of my embellishments. So I'm just going to put those on after I'm done with sewing the back on. Okay. So the next step is to put the envelope back on. Now I have a little trouble doing this the way they have it in the instructions, so I'm going to show you the way I do it. This is going to have binding around the edge, so we're just going to put the pillow front and back with the wrong sides together because we're not going to be turning it. We're going to be putting binding around the edge. So what I'm going to do, they tell you to lay these down first and then lay this on top. I have a hard time doing that. So I'm going to flip my top over, and so this is the back of it. And then I'm going to put my envelope back on. And you can do it either way. You know, you can have your opening on this end if you want, or you can have the opening on this end. It doesn't really matter. I think what they do is put the opening on the left-hand side. So when I flip this over, my opening is going to be on the right. So it doesn't matter. Either way is perfectly acceptable. It just depends on what works for you. But then what you're going to do, so what works easier for me, I'm going to turn this is my top. I'm turning it face down on my machine here. And then I'm going to line up the raw edges with that big one. And see, there's still a little spot right here. That's where that little one's going to go. The hem is down, okay? And then I'm going to lay the little one on top here and overlap them. Okay, so this way, I don't know which way they do it. Let me see which way they say in the instructions. They show I don't know which way works the best. I want to look at this just a little bit and see which way might work the best. To put the small one down, let's see here. I don't know that it really matters, but when you put the pillow in, you're going to be putting the pillow in this way, so it might be easier to put the big one over the top. And then you'd slide your pillow in this way. They don't really show a good picture in the book, so let's take a look at the book here. It says place back pieces right side down overlapping the edges at the center. So they don't really show you which side they're overlapping. Place the pillow top right side over. So I'm doing it from the opposite way. So I'm trying to decide which would be better to have open. I think it might be easier for the long one to be open, and then you don't only have to get a little bit of the pillow in the end. So let's do that because I think that might be a little easier to get the pillow in. I don't think it really matters as long as they're overlapped here. Okay, so they're going to overlap a couple of inches. Like that. Okay, so then what I'm going to do, so I think that's what we'll do. We'll do the long piece on the outside and the little piece on the inside, just because I think it'd be easier to slip your pillow in this way and then pull this back and tuck it in this little short end. So we'll do it that way. I don't think it really shows in the picture very well. And then I'm going to make sure that I've pinned, especially these little junctions, you know, where they overlap here. I want to make sure that I've got those pinned well. Just a second here. Make sure everything's lined up. I think this one kind of got cattywampus on me here. There we go. There we go. I'm going to make sure those are pinned where the intersections are. Like that. But this is a little different than some of the envelope backs because you are not going to, remember, we're not turning the pillow inside out. We're actually doing everything with the wrong sides together. So I'm just going to pin this. Let's get the corners pinned. So I got those good. They won't move on me, hopefully. There we go. All right. And then it looks like I might need a pin up here. So I don't have this moving on me either. So I'm just pinning these around. All right. So there's what it's going to look like. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to stitch from the top just because I want to be able to see where I'm stitching. It says to put a 1/4 inch seam allowance around there, but remember we also have to put binding on. So I'm going to actually make a very scant 1/4 inch or maybe an 1/8. I'm going to sew around this just to hold the whole thing together before I put the binding on. But I don't know that I'm going to do a full 1/4 inch because I don't want that line to show when I go to put my binding on in case I get off. So I'm just going to use about an 1/8 of an inch. So I've still got my needle in the center. And I'm going to run the fabric along on my machine on the inside of this foot. So I know that's about about an 1/8 of an inch. And I'm just going to, we're basically doing a little baste all the way around here. I think I got my foot controller plugged in. We're just going to baste around the pillow. And I'm slowly going over these little tiny pins. Because remember, I use these little tiny magic pins. And you can drive over them slowly and carefully. Things don't scoot on me so much if I don't have to take all the pins out. So I'm doing about an 1/8 of an inch just to get this all put together so when we work with the binding we don't have to worry about things scooting around on us. Okay, whoops. Let's back up a stitch. Okay. Do this side. And I'm going all the way around because remember the envelope backing gives us the opening, so we don't have to worry about an opening. We just go all the way around the outside edge. But it was easier for me to sew from the front because then I knew where my line was than it was from the back. So I am kind of taking the pins out as I go because when I'm going over them backwards, so they're sticking up a little bit. So okay. So here's my next side. And again, this won't show because we're going to take a full 1/4 inch when we do the binding. Oops, need another stitch there. And then around here. And I'm going to have to trim my backing just a little bit because I noticed my backing was just a little off. I'm not a very good cutter. So often my backing is just a hair off. Okay, so there we got our 1/8 of an inch. So that's good. That's just kind of a basting stitch to kind of hold everything together for us while we're getting ready to do this binding. Okay. So what I'm going to do then is I noticed that my backing was just a little off here, so I'm just going to trim that off just so that my front and my back are the same size. I noticed that like I said, I'm not a very good cutter. Just trim that little bit off there. The rest of it looked pretty good. It was just that one little spot, so I must have got crooked. Okay. So the back is on, and then the little pillow form will go in here, and then you'll stuff it in under here. Okay, and then there'll be this little overlap right here. Okay. So let me trim these little ends. Okay, so now when I'm going to do the binding, and the way they say in the instructions to do the binding is to sew it on the front and then turn it over to the back and hand stitch it down. Well, you know, I don't like to hand stitch. I like to do this with the sewing machine. So I'm going to show you how I do binding with the sewing machine. And we're going to put the binding on the back of the pillow. So I am going to sew the binding on the back of the pillow instead of the front. And then I'm going to turn it to the front and I'm going to zigzag it down. So this is how I do most of my quilts and stuff. I don't do every quilt this way, but I do a lot of my small pillows and my wall hangings this way because I need to do samples quickly and I don't like to hand stitch. So I like to use my sewing machine to put the binding on. The one thing I do like to do is I kind of choose a matchy thread to my binding because you're going to see the stitching a little bit. So you want the stitching to really, dissolve, and be more invisible on binding. So I have very matchy brown thread for this. And then if I don't have a matchy thread, I use monofilament. But this one I did have a nice brown that will work, okay? So what we're going to do, so I'm going to show you how to put the binding on. So we're going to do this on the back. I am going to start with one end, okay? And I'm going to leave, now this is a real small pillow, so I want to leave a little tail of about maybe 6 inches or so, okay? And so I'm going to go down here and I'm going to start real near the corner, all right? And when I use my binding, of course I want a 1/4 inch seam. So on my Brother machine, I'm going to use my Q tab, which is where my quilting stitches are, and I'm going to use Q02, which is my piecing stitch. It gives me my 1/4 inch seam, places the needle to the right at the 5.5 level millimeter, and then I can run my fabric right along the edge of my standard J foot because I do need to zigzag afterwards so then I don't have to change my foot. So I'm going to leave my little tail here. I'm going to go down here very close to the corner so I can at least get a little bit of this side stitched. Find my 1/4 inch because I've got it right along the edge of my foot, and then I'm just going to tie off here. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to stop about a 1/4 inch from the corner. Okay, and then I'm going to tie off there. So then we're going to go around the corner. So this is the first going around the corner. Okay, so I don't have very much sewn, but that's okay. Trim this and get it out of our way. Okay, so we just need to have the corner. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my binding and I'm going to flip it back at a 45-degree angle. So I don't know if you can see, it's a little dark, so let me see if we can pull it over here. And I'm going to match that up at a 45-degree angle, like this. So I've got it's straight up now. And then I'm going to pull it straight down so I have this beautiful square corner, like that. So it's nice and square, okay? And then I'm going to start off the end. Drop my needle, we're going to tie off, and then I'm going to sew down to the other side of the little pillow over here with a 1/4 inch seam and stop about a 1/4 inch from the end. Go to about a 1/4 inch from the end. I'm going to tie off again, and then we're going to go around another corner. So this is continuous binding, so it'll go all the way around. Okay, so that's going to be all beautiful, but this is the back. So we're doing this on the back and we're going to flip it to the front. This is a great way to do these little pillows because I just don't have time to sit and hand stitch. It's not my favorite thing to do anyway, and I feel like I'm wasting time if I'm just sitting and hand stitching, binding down. So I do this all with the machine. Okay, so I did the same thing. I flipped it up at a 45-degree angle. Let me do it again so you just saw what I did. Okay, flip it up like that. Then I'm going to pull it straight down and line up those raw edges. Okay, now on the group Dropbox, if you go to Sew Along with Jan on Dropbox, and I will put this up with this video as well, I have a document called Bind Aid, and this is how I learned to bind. And it is a great document. It's just one page. It's actually 2 pages front, one page front and back, so 2 pages. And it is so great. It shows you great pictures on how to bind. I had never done any binding before, and I had a friend give me that little document, and so I do have it in the Dropbox. And so with this video, I'll make sure I put it up when I post it so you can get to the Dropbox file of it. It's so good, and it gives you pictures, so if you can't remember, that's why I like to video myself doing binding quite often, because not everybody quilts, and I hadn't either. I'd never learned to do this, and I had to do a project for something I was doing for brother, and I had to learn to do binding, so that's how I learned, and it really helps because it's got good pictures. Okay, I'm just going to stop about 1/4 of an inch from the end where that corner is. I'm going to tie off, and then we're going to flip it around again. Okay, straight up, and then at a 45-degree angle, and then straight down, and match up your raw edges. I thought this was cute fabric. I had this orange fat quarter. I had just enough to make a backing. Okay, we're going to stitch 1/4 of an inch down to the last corner here. We're just about done with the corner. Okay, we're going to stop there, about 1/4 of an inch from the end. I'm going to tie off, and then I'm going to go around the last corner. And now we don't want to sew too far around the corner, because we need to be able to do the little flipping thing that I'm going to show you here in a minute to attach these two ends. So don't go around the corner too far. So I'm just going to go back up at a 45-degree angle, and then straight down. And then we'll only sew a few inches in. So we need a little room to maneuver here. So, oops, let me go back a little bit further. There we go. Tie off. Looks like I need to take one more stitch back again. There we go. All right. And then we're going to sew in a few inches. But we want to have enough room to maneuver, so don't go in too far. There we go. I think that'll be enough, and then we'll tie off. But we're going to leave this little opening here, because now we got to get these two ends connected to each other. Okay. So here's our binding, and we're ready to do the connection. So what I do, this works really well for me, and this is how I learned it on Bind Aid. So I looked at the pictures very carefully to see that I was doing it correctly. Okay, so what I do is, this is the end that I just finished sewing, and I'm going to fold that down like this. Just kind of get it flat so I can work with this. Then I'm going to pull this end, which is the end that we started with, over. And we need this to overlap 2 1/4 inches, because remember, that's how big we made our binding, how wide we made our binding. So I'm going to get my little hem gauge here. And from the end of this, I'm going to measure in 2 1/4 inches from the end of this is the piece that we started with, okay? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to measure in 2 1/4 inches, and it's going to be over here, and I'm going to put a pin in the underneath side of the binding. So I'm just putting a pin in there, so I know where my 2 1/4 inch overlap ends, okay? Then I'm going to pull this off, and now this, see, we left this plenty long enough. I'm going to go ahead and cut this off. I'm going to just turn it over where my pin is, and I'm going to cut this off. So it has a 2 1/4 inch overlap. If you're doing 2 1/2 inch binding, you would need a 2 1/2 inch overlap, but we're doing 2 1/4. Okay, so here's the end we ended with, and this is the end we started with. So now they overlap 2 1/4 inches. So here's the end here, and here's the end here. Okay. Now, to do we need to connect these together so it's continuous all the way across. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this one down. This is the one we started with. I'm going to pull it down over here, And the first one we're going to work with is this one. So I'm going to lay this one open like this. So see, I kind of went a little too far here, so I'm actually going to rip back just a little bit so I have just a little bit more room to work, because that's why you don't want to have too much, you don't want to sew in. So it we'll re-sew it in a minute, but okay, it just gives me a little bit more freedom to open this. So I'm going to open this up and lay it flat. The wrong side is down, so the right side is up, okay, like this. So this is the end we ended with. Now I'm going to take the end we started with, okay, I'm going to turn it down at a 45-degree angle like this. Then I am going to open it up so that it is open. Can you see I've got it open here? This is the wrong side right here. And I'm going to continue on. I've got the wrong side up, and I'm going to keep the right side down, and I'm going to go match it up to this piece right here. So the right sides are together, and I turned it so that the corners are together, and I'm going to pin this in place. Get this one pinned, so I'm going to put probably 3 pins in here. I've done a lot of binding, so after I learned how to do binding, I've done a lot of binding. So I don't have to look at the pictures. I used to have to look at the pictures, but I don't anymore. Okay, but then we have to sew this together, and we're going to sew across here from corner to corner. So I'm going to mark the corners. I've got a white pen here, because since this is dark, I'll get my white chalk pencil out, and I'm going to mark the corner so I can see it. Sometimes it's hard to see. Okay, so there's one corner right there, and then the other corner's underneath, so I definitely want to mark that one so I can see where it starts. Okay, so I've got my corners marked. Then I'm going to sew. So I'm going to sew from here to here. Okay, I'm going to put the needle back in the center. So when I'm on the quilting tab, what I do is I don't have to go all the way back to my normal, like my regular utility sewing screen. I can go to Q01. So then it places my needle in the center. That's where I want to be. I'm going to turn my laser light back on, and I'm going to put that laser light right down on my white mark line. Drop my needle in there. I'm going to take a stitch because it didn't quite hit the fabric. There we go. Okay, and then I'm going to get this laid flat. You want to make sure your binding is laid flat. Okay, and then I'm going to aim my laser light over towards that other white line. And if you have to do this by just looking, you know, it works just fine. I actually do this eyeballed most of the time. But I wanted to show you the laser light. Okay, so there's my line. So I went from cross there. Okay, now I'm just going to take the pins out. I'm going to cut off to about 1/4 inch. You know, if it's not perfect, that's fine. Cut that corner off, and then I'm going to get my laser light turned off here. Then I'm going to lay this down, and I'm going to open that seam up. I'm just going to finger press this one, so I don't have to take it over to the ironing board. I'll just finger press it, open. And then I'm going to lay this down, and if I pull slightly, it's just going to pop right down into where I need it to be. This is the folded edge, this is the raw edge. And now it's all in one piece. Look at there. So now I'm going to go ahead and pin this onto the back. And remember, we had to rip back a little bit, so we'll have to stitch maybe a little further back. So we'll stitch back to there. And I'm just going to pin this to my little pillow here. And then we're going to stitch 1/4 inch, finish this off with our 1/4 inch seam. So we'll go back to Q02. And, oops, just a second here. And on this one, since it's really small, you'll probably have to pull your corner back to stitch there. So I'm going to go back to Q02 so that my needle is in the 1/4 inch line, or the 1/4 inch position. I'm going to go ahead and drop my needle and tie off, and then I'm going to stitch down the rest of the binding, and it's all in one piece. Look there. Okay, so get down here at the end. I'm going to tie off again. All right. And there, the binding is on the back of our little pillow. Isn't that cool? All right. So there's the front. And you can see there's two lines there because that inside line was the one that we used as just as like a, a tacking line. Okay. So I've got a few other little ends here. I'm going to go ahead. These are all going to be inside the binding, so don't worry if it doesn't look perfect. It's going to all be covered up, so you won't see any of this. Okay. I always like to trim some of the ends off, though. There. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this over. In order to do the final step, we have to zigzag around the outside binding, or around the binding on the front. So the first step, though, is you need to go take this to your ironing board, and you need to firmly press the binding out all the way around so that it's beautifully pressed, okay, and has a nice firm press line all the way around. And then I'll show you how to do the corners so that we're ready for to sew the binding down. Okay, so I pressed out my binding on the back, and I try to stay out of the corners so that I have a nice smooth corner, because I'll show you what we're going to do with the corners next. So what we're going to do now is we're going to turn this to the front, and the first thing we got to do is get our corners organized so that we can do the final stitching. So I'm just going to flip these in like this. And what I normally do first is I take my binding and I flip it over and I put one of my little clover clips near each corner. I don't put it in the corner. I like to leave an opening like that. So I'm going to put these, I put, the clips around the corner area just to kind of hold it in place. I don't actually clip my binding all the way around. I just do the corners so that those are right where I want them, but I just kind of hold my binding with my hand when I do this. So we're going to go ahead and turn this to the front. Get some clips on here. Okay, so this one's really small, so it's almost clipped all the way around anyway. But normally I don't. I just clip the corners. Like when I'm doing a big quilt, that's all I have is just the four corners like this, clipped with my clips. And then I'm going to take, hopefully you can see this. This fabric's a little dark, so hopefully I want to get this corner beautiful, okay? So what I do is on the right-hand side here, I'm going to hold this down with my thumb. You can see where your stitch line is, where you stitched it on. I'm going to pull that up to the stitch line, okay? And then the front piece on the top, I'm going to stick my fingernail up in here and I'm going to pull this down and make my beautiful corner. And it's all folded over, okay? And then I'm going to take a pin and I'm going to put a pin right through that corner like that to hold it in place. So I have that beautiful corner all tacked down so it won't go anywhere. Okay, we'll do that again. So on the right-hand side, I'm going to start with the right-hand side. I'm going to push my thumb up into the corner, and you can see I'm making it turn over. It's turning over here, and then I'm going to pull it down and match up my line and make that beautiful corner. So I'm just making my corners like the back ones were made when we did the flipping. We have to make these corners ourselves. Then I want to pin it down. That pin was bent, so it wasn't working. That one needs to go in the garbage. I bend a lot of pins because I leave them in. Okay, so I'm getting that in the corner, and then I'm going to pin up so that I have that corner beautiful and held in place. Then we're going to go over to this one. Do the same thing. I'm going to hold my right hand, take my right thumb and push it up to the corner, and then I'm going to make the corner. You can feel the binding turning, and then I'm going to bring it down to my stitch line. Not quite there. Second, I've got this little hair in there. There we go. Get it beautiful right in the corner there, and then I'm going to put my pin in the corner and up And then that holds those corners in place so that they don't move when I get to those. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing here. Let's get another little thread we need to cut. Okay, so then we're going to do the same thing. Right hand, I'm going to push this up to the corner, starting to fold that binding in at a 45-degree angle and bring it down to the corner. This is the easiest way I've ever found to do binding, and it looks very acceptable. This would not be the way you would make my binding if you were doing a competition. This works really great for these little pillows and small like wall hangings. But if I have a really nice quilt that I'm doing, I don't do the binding this way. I like to hand stitch it. But this works so well for the majority of my small projects. Okay, and it goes a lot faster because you're using the sewing machine instead of hand stitching. Okay, so now we're ready to start zigzagging. And to do the zigzagging, I'm going to use, I'm going to go back to my regular utility tab 1. And I like to use 1-10 for my zigzag. You can save side lengths and widths in this machine, and most of the machines at least 1 you can save. Now this machine says 5, so I like to use my binding, and it usually comes up from my binding because that's what I use a lot. So my binding width for my zigzag is 2 millimeters and my length is 1.4, so it's not very wide and it's just a little longer so that I don't have quite so much thread. The other thing that works very well is to use this number 50 cotton thread so that it's very thin and you don't have a lot of bulk in your zigzagging, okay? And you also want it to be quite matchy with your fabric. This thread is very matching, so I don't know, you'll even hardly be able to see it. So that's 1-10, and I have it set up for the width of 2 and the length at 1.4. Okay, so we're going to put this down here. And the trick with this that I've learned, and I'm going to put my glasses on so I can see, this is dark. I hold my binding, and like I said, I don't pin my binding down. I actually hold it. And I'm going to put it right up to my stitch line, which is the inside line. Remember, we had the little one, the narrow one, just to hold everything together. So I'm going to put it right up to my stitch line, and I'm going to lay my foot down on that binding. Now, the Brother Baby Locked feet have a little notch right in the center right here, and I have that right on the very edge of the, the folded edge of my binding. I'm going to drop my needle down into the fabric, and I'm going to tie a knot. Okay. Now, when I zigzag, I want the left zig to be on the fabric, the main fabric here, and I want the zag on the right hand side to be on the binding. Okay, so I'm taking 1 stitch off the binding and 1 stitch on the binding, and that's how you can get it to match up on the back. So I got my fabric right on that line that we sewed it on with, and I'm taking stitches. The right hand one is on the binding and the left hand one is just off the binding, and I'm just going to zigzag like that down towards my next clip here. I'm just holding it in place. It works better for me just to hold it than it does to clip it. So when I get close to my corner, I'm going to take that, I took that clip out. Okay, so I'm going to continue on. I'm just holding my binding down, and I'm putting the binding right up to that sew line that we sewed it down with. And the left hand zig is off the binding, and the zag is on the binding. Okay, so we're going to finish this up. And so when I get down here to the corner, I'm going to take my fingernail and just pull it flat so that it stays in place where I want it. And I'm leaving that pin in. Now I am going to pull my pin back a little bit. Make sure my binding is right where I want it to be, so it covers up. We don't want that stitch, that straight stitch to show. Okay, so we're going to go into the corner, and I'm going to stop. I think I need to take 1 more stitch, in this corner. Now when I turn the corner, I'm going to leave that pin in. I don't take the pin out. I'm going to put my foot down. Now I can see that my little center notch here is to the right too far. So I'm going to raise my needle so that I get oriented correctly, and I'm going to scoot this over so that my binding is right on that notch again. So it's right in the center, okay? And then I'm going to drop my needle back down before I start moving. Okay, and I'm going to line up my binding with my line, my stitch line, and then I'm going to start up the other side. Okay, and I can take this other clip out. Second, I got a thread here. Okay, so I got to get my line lined up. Just watch your fingers, because I get kind of close to my fingers. All right, so I'm going to, now again, when I'm getting close to this corner, I'm going to take my finger into the corner and I'm going to pull back a little bit so that it flattens it out nice. And then we're going to keep going around here. I just love these little pillows with the binding on the edge because they look so finished and so cute. Okay, I'm going to pull my pin out a little bit, and remember, we're going to leave those pins in those corners and make sure that that line is covered. Got my fingernail in the corner. There we go. And over to the corner. I'm just going to keep going into the corner. Okay. And then I'm going to stop with my needles down. I'm going to turn the corner. Let's see where I ended up. So see, I took a little bit too far, so my notch is over about a stitch. I'm going to raise my needle, and I'm going to move the pillow form over. I'm going to drop my needle again, and now that little notch is right along the edge of my binding again. So I'm going to make sure that my stitch line is covered, and then we're going to move on down this other side. But I thought I better tape this again, because everybody's always asking me about binding, and I've done several binding videos, but you know, it doesn't hurt to do it again, right? So you can see me binding these little pillows. Little things are almost harder to do, I think, than quilts are, just because there's so little binding. And I find them a little harder actually to do than doing bigger things. Okay, so let's get my binding over onto my line where it belongs. And I'm just holding it. Okay, so I can see my line a little bit, so I need to get my binding over. There we go. Okay. Then I'm going to take this other clip out over here. Let's get gotta take a few more stitches yet before we do the corner. Okay, let's get that. Now again, I'm going to go down here with my finger, and I'm going to make sure that my corner is nice and flat down here, and hold this down. And keep going around, getting this flattened out. Because you can hardly see the thread. It looks really nice. Now I'm going to go back up into that corner just like I have before, and I'm going to take a couple stitches into the corner, and I'm going to stop with my needle down. We're going to turn around the corner here. This is going to be so cute. I'm going to take this clip out, and then we're going to do the same thing. So I need to put my foot down, and oh, I'm pretty good this time. I did well with my corner, so I don't have to move it this time. And I'm going to get my binding lined up on my line, my stitching line, and then start down the other side. Once you do this a little bit, it gets pretty easy. I've gotten a lot better at it, and my back looks nice. You know, I'm getting much better at it. It does take some practice, and I've done a lot of small, like baby quilts this way. I've done a lot of small wall hangings, lots of pillows this way, just because it's faster than having to hand stitch everything. And if you want to hand stitch it, that's fine. Go ahead and sew the stuff on the front, sew your binding on the front and then flip it to the back and hand stitch it on. That's perfectly fine if you like to do that. I just don't like to hand stitch. Okay, so then we're going into the corner again. Oops. Got a little crooked, so you might see a stitch there. Okay, we're going to turn around the corner. Get this clip out of here. Now, this is where we started right here. So I am going to put a pin there because sometimes my thread is so matching, I can't tell where I need to stop. So we'll put a pin in there. All right, so we're going to get this lined up. I'm going to put my foot down and make sure, I think I'm a little off, so I'm going to raise my needle and I'm going to slip this over just a little bit and then start down the last little section. Okay, make sure that my line is all covered up nicely. Just about there. I don't like to zigzag too far over like where we started because it makes bulk. So that's why I like to mark it with a pin so that I can stop right where I started so that it doesn't look like I've started and stopped. Okay, so I'm going to go right there and I'm going to tie off. Okay. And then we can take all these pins out. Oops. Get my clip out of the way. And I always got to be careful with these pins because I have a tendency to put the pokey end out and it really gets, you have to be careful not to poke yourself. Okay, so there is the binding on our little pillow. Isn't that cute? And then I'm going to show you also, if you'd like me to, I will show you also how to make a pillow form. You can buy the Kimberbell pillow form. I just don't happen to have one, and I would like to finish this today. So I'm going to go get a little piece of fabric, and I'll show you how I make a pillow form next in the video. As long as we're doing videos, I might as well just let it run, and I'll show you how I make my pillow form as well. So give me just a minute to go get my stuff and I will be back. So here's our little pillow. Isn't it cute? We're going to put our pillow form in from the front, from the back here and slip it into the little envelope. Okay. It's going to be so cute. And then we'll put our little purple flowers on. All right. So I'm going to stop the video for a minute. I'm going to go get my stuff to make a pillow form. And then I am going to show you how to make a pillow form. Okay, so we're going to make a pillow form for this little pillow. These little pillows finish up 5.5 by 9.5. So what I do to make a pillow form, and you can certainly buy the Kimberbell pillow form. It's a lot faster if you don't have time to make a pillow form, but it never seems like I have one when I need one. So I often make my own. So this is what I've done. I've got a piece of muslin here, 2 pieces, and this is more like a solid cotton. It's a little nicer than a muslin. And what I've done is I've cut it 6 inches by 10 inches because the little pillows turn out 9.5 by 5.5. So I've made it a 1/2 inch bigger, and I'm going to take a 1/4 inch seam all the way around. Okay, so I cut it 6 by 10, and then so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sew. I'm going to leave a little opening in the center of it, the bottom here, maybe around 2 inches or so. 2 or 3 inches because I need to stuff it, and I'm going to go ahead and we're just going to stitch around this piece. I've got my cotton, cotton thread in. I switched over to a kind of a cream colored cotton thread, so I'm just going to stitch 1/4 inch seam. I'm using my Q02 again so I can just leave my regular J-foot on. Whoops, let me move this out of the way. Flip around the corner here. These are pretty easy to make, and so most of mine actually have ones that I've made. The fabric's a little nicer on the ones you make, especially if you use like a Kona, like this is sort of like a Kona cotton, and I think the pillow forms hold up a little bit nicer than the ones that you buy because they have that lighter weight fabric on them. So I make a lot of mine, but I use one if I have one around. I think I have an 8 by 8, so I'll probably use that one. I thought I'd show you how I make my pillow forms. If I'm doing an 8 by 8 pillow, I cut my pillow form 8.5 by 8.5. So, and then I sew around it just like I'm doing this one. So, and that the square one. So I make that one 8.5 by 8.5. I just add a 1/2 inch to whatever the finished size is going to be. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and tie this off. I left a little opening so I can stuff it. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn this right side out. I like to do my grandma's little trick on the corners. I'm just going to I put my first finger into the corner. I'm going to flip this back and I'm going to make the corner in the corner, flip it in. That way the corners are nice and square and not, and I don't like to trim corners because I always go through the end. So I'm just going to go ahead and flip that one in. Like that. I might get my little point turner out here in a second. Okay, look at this side. First finger, and I'm going to make a corner right in the corner with the fabric. Turn it so it's a beautiful corner. And then I'll get my little point turner out and it'll even be nicer. Okay, just a second here. Flip this in, and then in. Okay, so let's get my little point turner out here. It also works really well for stuffing, so I use it for stuffing a lot. Seems like it always goes to the bottom. This is for those of you who haven't seen, this is a Floriani point turner. It has like a little ball end here, so it doesn't go through your corners. And I use it for stuffing, like when I'm stuffing my little pillow here too. So, okay. Yeah, so the square pillows in the Bench Buddy series turn out to be 8 by 8. So you would cut your fabric 8.5 by 8.5 and take a 1/4 inch seam. All right. So there is our little pillow so far. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a little stuffing. I've just got, I use Morning Glory. Yeah, Morning Glory stuffing. I'm allergic to the polyfill, so polyfill makes my hands itch, so I can't use polyfill. But this stuff is great, and it's called Morning Glory. They actually have it in the store now at Hobby Lobby. I've always had to order it online for years. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to stuff this into, so what I do with my pillow forms is I stuff the corners first. So I take my little point turner and with the blunt end of it, and I like to try to get my corners stuffed first. So sometimes I just have to use my finger. For this one I'm going to have to. So I like to get my corners so they have some stuffing in them. I'm not using very big pieces. This is a very small pillow form. I make all my bench pillow forms like this too. So those are a lot larger, and so I go through a lot of stuffing, but it's a lot faster, and then I always have fabric and stuffing around. I don't always have a pillow form. So okay, so I'm just going to do all the corners first. Get this one. I just love these little bench buddies. They're so much fun to do. But I thought I could at least make one pillow form. I might make one on some of the other videos too, so you can see the pillow forms. Okay, so there's my 4 corners. So I got my corners stuffed, and now I'm going to start stuffing. You know, I'm going to go from end to end. So we'll go down here with a little piece, down here at the end. And you don't want to overstuff your pillows because otherwise they're so tight. So you want them to be nicely stuffed and firm, but not overstuffed. Okay, so I get the end. So I kind of go do the ends first, and then I start working to the center in the back here. So I'm going to put some stuffing up in the back here. And you notice I'm not using very big pieces of stuffing at a time. So, okay, again, put this back here. And I start kind of, you want to smooth it out, and this is exactly the way I do the bench pillow ones too. I've just been making my pillow forms because I'm so often don't have any around, and it's like I'm always needing a pillow, so I make a lot of pillow forms. Okay, so I'm working on each end now again. That, and I'm kind of working towards the center. So I go end to end, then I kind of go in the back, and then I keep working towards the center. And it keeps it from getting all lumpy. And again, we don't want to have our pillow form too tight. Okay. Okay, just a little bit more in the center here. Let's see how we're doing. Especially these. You don't want them too tight because these little pillows are so small, you know. You don't want your pillow forms too poofy, so I don't usually overstuff them by any means. Okay, just a little bit more, I think. That looks pretty good. I've done most of these small bench buddies that I've done. I did all the like the January, February, March, and April ones, and those were, I think, all have the little pillow forms that I made. So, oops. Okay, so there, I think we're good. I think I'm happy with that little pillow form. Looks pretty good, I think. Not too fat. Might need a little bit more stuffing down here. I think I need to move a little stuffing down the end here. This one end looks a little bit flat compared to the other end. Yeah, that'd be better. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, and I am not very good at this, so I probably won't videotape myself. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn in, I'm going to finger press in my 1/4 inch seams, you know, on the edge where I had this opening here. I'm just going to finger press those in so they're nice and firm. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hand stitch this little end closed. Okay. It's really hard to, really hard to do this on the sewing machine, so I never do these on the sewing machine. I usually hand stitch them, but I'm a really poor hand stitcher, so I don't think I'll video that part. So I'm just going to pin it shut, and then I will do the hand stitching, and then I will show you putting the pillow form into the little pillow. So we're almost done. Isn't this cute? I had so much fun doing this today. This is my Sunday afternoon fun. Okay, so here's the little, I got that pinned shut, and I'm going to go ahead and stitch that shut with a hand stitch it shut. Then we'll be ready to insert the little pillow form. Okay, so here's my little pillow form, and we're about to have the great unveiling. We're going to put the little cover on the pillow form here. It's like I got a couple of threads I need to trim off on the back here. All right, and then I've got my glue gun going. I normally don't use this on my sewing machine, but I'm going to go ahead and we're going to put and my little leaves have dried since we've been working on the finishing. So here's my little leaves. I took them off the styrofoam, and they're all dry. So then we can put the little leaves on too. So let's go ahead and put this in. So I made this a little differently than the instructions, so so you can put this part in. These little pillows have always been hard to get in because they always do the opening from the end. And so it's always hard to get the little pillow down into the into the cover. So let's see how we do here. Sometimes you can't get your hand down in there, so it's really hard to slip it in. That's why you don't want them to be too fat, because you kind of have to stuff them down in there. Once they get started, they move in, but they're a little bit hard. You can't really get your hands in here. All right, so we're just about there. Put the end of it down in there a little bit further. Sometimes I even use my little turning tool to do that. And then I'm going to take this little flipper, you know, that little flipper that's underneath. We're going to put that down, push that down into the pillow. That worked pretty well to do the little short one on underneath. Get the little tips down. And then we got the little pillow on. And so sometimes I'll take this over to my iron and just, you know, just press that little back again so that it doesn't look so wrinkly when I'm done. Sometimes I get kind of wrinkly when I'm messing with it. So I'll just take that and press that again. And there's our little pillow. Look at there. And it's got the little pillow form in it now. I think I still need to pull it down this way a little bit. So one of those things you kind of have to play with it until you get the pillow form just where you want it. Looks good. Okay, so then the next step would be to put our little leaves on. So I'm going to look at the picture. I'm not sure exactly where they put them. Looks like they might have put one like in here. So I think I'm just going to put a little hot glue down here at the bottom. Looks like they put one in here, and then there's one kind of up in this little space, and then there's another one down like over here. So let's start with this one over here. So I think I'm going to try the hot glue method and see if this works. Hopefully it does, since I'm showing you on film. So I'm going to put this one here, I think, because because it was kind of down with this little batch of leaves. I think this is heated up. Let's see here. Now you don't want to use too much glue because you don't want it to really show. So I'm going to put it down here on the, like the leafy, like the stem part down here, so that it won't really show. And then we're just going to slip this down. Yeah, it looks like it's about in that area. And then we're just going to push it down and glue it on. You could use like fabric glue. They had you sew them on, and that's fine too if you want to sew it on. I don't like to sew these little leaves on though before I do the pillow, because then I mess them all up when I'm doing it. But you know, I think this needs to have a little more glue up here. So I'm going to go ahead and on that little stem in the center, I'm going to put just a little bit of hot glue on the back. And that's why I like to do this after I put the pillow on, because then I can kind of know where my pillow, where it's going to be. Okay, so then, and it's still dimensional, but I just don't want it to be flopping around on me. There, that looks good. So it's still dimensional, and you can raise it up, but it's just not flopping around then. So that looks nice. And then let's see, this one was over here. So I think it should go like in this area here somewhere. We'll do the same thing. It looks like it might be tipped this way a little bit. Yeah, I think that'll be good. So I'm going to go ahead and put the glue like on the stem area so that it's like on the thread, so you're not really seeing the glue. You don't want to see it through your organza too much. And let's see, it looks like it's kind of tipped this way. And yeah, sort of like this. So let's tip it that way. And then I might go ahead and then put a little bit more on the top so that it doesn't flop around. It's still dimensional, but I just don't want it flip-flopping around on my pillow here. So let's put a little bit of, oops, put a little bit up here on the stem. Okay, oops, got it a little bit where I don't want it. There we go. Okay, we'll flip it down there. Always got all the hot glue strings here, but we'll get them like that. Looks good. Get the strings out of here. Whoops. Like I said, I normally don't do this on my machine, but I have the camera here, so then you can see. And then the last one looks like it's up around here. So it looks like it might be kind of like this. Okay, so we'll do the same thing. I'm going to put a little bit of glue on the stem area down here on the fat thread so it doesn't really show. And then let's put this one. This one's going to be stem up, so we'll kind of go like this. I'm just kind of looking at the picture. Looks like it's nice there. Like that. And then we'll do the same thing. That's why, like I said, I like to do my embellishments after I put the pillow form in, because then I feel like then they're really where I want them. Because if you put them on beforehand, sometimes then, you know, when you put the pillow form, things kind of move around a little bit. And I always am messing up, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put a little bit of glue on the thread under here. Oops, a little bit too much in there. And then bring it down so that it stays put for me. Like that. And then kind of flip them up. Here. And there's our first pillow. This is the September rectangle pillow. Isn't that darling? I just couldn't wait to make these. The fall and the winter, like the Halloween ones, are just adorable. So that's that I decided to do these. This is the fall. We're going to do these this fall, and we'll do 2 of them a month. We are going to do the May Your Days Be Merry and Bright in November, and I'll pre-record all these videos so that you'll still have the pillows. So there's the pillow. This is the first one done with the embellishments. It's so pretty with all the, look at all the glitter. Isn't it just, I just thought it turned out so cute. I'm so excited about doing these. And then I will video, and we'll have live classes on the square one. So I'm ready to start my square one. That's the second one I'll do. So anyway, thank you for joining me for part 2 of the Hello Fall Bench Buddy. And this is the September one. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.